platform. So welcome. This is the last in this series, but we're going to start a new series soon. So here's the team, Blue Stars. I feel like I'm missing something here. One second here. That's me celebrating our 10th anniversary in this shelter in place time, but that's okay. That's okay, because what 10 years is telling me is that there's just a lot of practice and a lot of growth that's aligning in the way we can work with you all online right now and be in conversation and be in community with you. Here's my awesome, amazing team, and there's nothing better as a business owner than having a team of creative, intelligent, dynamic, educational professionals. And educators are the best. They're the best company, always seeking, always learning. So great. And that team, together with me, helps students gain admission to all of these wonderful schools this year. Like I said, I'm a little short-staffed on operations, so we don't yet have this on the website, but I have wanted to share our awesome results. And as you can see, they run the gamut of all different levels of competitiveness. So we just really love working with all sorts of students, helping them move to the next level of actualization and success and maturity. And for us, the results are, those are the extra goodies, you know. But you can see, I do want to point out, if you can see Oberlin here, the 22,000 in merit aid and the John Frederick Scholarship, the Leadership Scholarship, these are two separate students of ours. This isn't just one student. So we really try to help our students just max out their application so they can shine and get noticed. And of course, you can see we've got Harvard, we've got Stanford this year. In the history of Blue Stars, we have had admission to Harvard or Stanford every year. Johns Hopkins, Duke, Carnegie Mellon. So I just wanted to share that with you. Also, we've got some awesome summer program results. Of course, you know, Cosmos is canceled, and that sucks. One of our students who got into Cosmos is applying to new programs already, so we're just turning things around here. A bunch of these programs are online. The Columbia Pre-College is online. Interlochen has gone online. The Yale Young Global Scholars. So what else? The New York Times Pre-College has gone online. The NASA, I believe, is online as well. So I just wanted to show you, we were talking about summers last week. And this work in gaining admission to summer programs, this is such a great precursor to college admission work. And the students who do this kind of work with us, and I won't kid you, there are growing pains involved when we work with our younger students on summer program essays, but it yields so much when it comes time for college admission. So congrats to all these wonderful students. Okay, this is the plan for today. 10 minutes on rapid response update, 20 minutes on new trends, I think, and then 15 minutes Q&A. We've got a break coming up next week, which is good since APs are going on anyway and everybody could use a break. And then we'll start our new series on essay writing, which I'm really, really excited about. That's also our wheelhouse. And I plan to make that participatory and bring in an editor for each one of the webinars. So wish me luck on advancing my Zoom jockeying skills. Let's go forward together. Here are the topics for today: impact on current seniors, impact on current juniors, admissions wisdom. I got some good stuff. Really good stuff today. New trends in admissions. Let's get started. Okay. Impact on current seniors. So UCLA is going to give students the option of attending class remotely or in person this year. It can't guarantee housing for students, however. And so they say that because of the pandemic and national travel restrictions, university officials don't know how many students will be able to live in apartments or dorms this fall. An increasing number of California community colleges plan to offer all fall classes online to protect students and staff. However, Purdue, University of Nebraska, University of Alabama, University of North Carolina, Baylor, and I think University of Chicago, I have to go back and check, plan to reopen. UC San Diego, however, is going to be administering a mass testing program. It's called Return and Learn. And the question in this EdSource article from 2 days ago is asking, will other universities follow their examples? So we don't know. Okay. But at UCSD, students in dormitories who test positive will be advised to quarantine, and they may be relocated to dedicated isolation housing with private bedrooms, bathrooms, meals delivered. Those students' health will be monitored. They will be interviewed to help trace people with whom they might have had close contact. They're not sure what to do with those who refuse to isolate themselves. This is from a Vox article that came out this week as well. It's sort of like a general speculation as to what college campus life might look like this coming fall. So this first quote is from the president of Brown. I linked you to that article last week. The capability to test all students upon arrival and regularly thereafter is critical. As we see, UCSD is picking up on that. University of Chicago will be picking up on that. Probably large lecture classes will be held online. Athletic events will go on without spectators. There's been a lot of talk about that generally in the mass media these days. Universities are considering inviting a smaller number of students to campus, maybe just freshmen, spreading them out across dorm facilities. And schools may have to ban social gatherings above a certain size and limit students' ability to have visitors on campus, or perhaps travel away from school on breaks. So I'm just trying to give you the latest so you can see how things are starting to take shape. It's a dynamic situation. So, but it's good to have whatever picture is being offered at the time. So that's what we have right now. Juniors, no new news here. I just like to have this as a placeholder. Except that there's a new test optional school, Cooper Union, so FYI. I also do link you to the list of test optional schools in the resources. So, and again, the Blue Stars policy on taking the SAT and the ACT, take it, okay? If it doesn't help, don't submit. It's a very individualized decision. I also wanted to point out that there is a new New York Times article on how to choose colleges by using virtual tours. And I would like to point out that you already have all of these resources. I've connected you to them in prior webinars. These are the 4 resources that the article mentions as well. I've linked you to this article too, so you have everything in one place. But I just wanted to show you, to let you know you already have this information, so you don't have to feel clueless or helpless. And you know, we've been on it. We're actually ahead of the game. So if you're following these webinars, you might be ahead of the game too. So you have links to all this stuff already. Oh yeah, so I participated in a bunch of webinars this week, and you know, the moderators are really gracious and lovely, and they have answered my questions. So here are the answers to the questions that you guys posed from last session. So you were wondering about how admissions officers will look at credit, no credit versus grades. You know, what happens if a student is forced to go credit, no credit, what happens if a student chooses that over grades, if they're given the option. So this is what Mark Butt, the director of undergraduate selection at Emory, says. He says, context, context, context. Feel free to contact your regional admissions officer. Also beware, advice given today might change tomorrow. It's the nature of the times. So these are on-the-spot answers that are being posed to these webinar guests. It might not feel satisfying for me in terms of my practice and for the counselors who work with me. I think we feel like, oh, this is just like usual. This is what we generally always do when we work with families, is we provide context. So that's what you'll need to do, and maybe it's something new for you. And as I've said before, there's a section in every college admissions application called additional information. And in the past, it wasn't used as much by students who felt like they had sort of said it all in the rest of the components of their application. We have encouraged additional information throughout our time working with students. And now admissions officers are going to expect that that's going to be another sort of featured piece of the application, providing that extra information. So that's what I have for you on that question. We did get it answered. And then I sat in on a wonderful interview between Sal Khan of the Khan Academy and Jim Nondorf, the VP and Dean of Admissions at University of Chicago. It was really lively, really spirited. Jim Nondorf is awesome. So I've linked you to that as well. And Sal Khan is awesome. I mean, he's amazing. And he asked my question, mentioned my name. It was super sweet. Anyway, so on the SAT, ACT in an ever-increasing test optional landscape, how do you view students who submit the ACT, SAT versus students who don't? So here's the answer. And again, on some level, it might not be satisfying to you. It's very interesting to me. His first response was that, well, 85 to 90% of applicants send in tests. So remember my advice from like 5 slides ago? Take the test. If you're interested in University of Chicago or a school of that caliber, yeah, take your standardized test. However, he said, for other students, it's just not relevant. So for example, a prospective art history major, this person might not do well on the SAT math portion, but does their coursework show that this person can complete the University of Chicago math requirement? If yes, then sold. And what he also pointed out was that a lot of test optional schools will accept other kinds of work. So certain schools like University of Chicago, they might accept the work you've done on Khan Academy as your, like, what you're showing for your standardized exam. That's also acceptable. So FYI in that. And then he said, well, gee, there are lots of ways to make your case. And this is a quote. Some submit amazing artwork, business plans, patents instead of test scores. Every school will tell you this. Testing is not the end all and be all. So I was really excited about that. Just to get the response, to get the interaction and feel like, if you guys have questions, people like the admissions community, we just tend to think about it as this like cold, authoritative. I'm gonna have a quote that addresses that in a second too from Jim Nondorf. And it's really not like that at all. They really do want to communicate with us what's going on. Okay, yes, wisdom. We're at the wisdom portion already. That's the news for now. Jim Nondorf, it's not what you don't do. It's what you do. Don't worry about what's missing. I love that. I just love that. I say that to our students our parents, all the time in a lot of different ways. It's easy to wonder what, other kids are doing, other families are doing. And often I get questions like, well, my child isn't in a sport. How is my child going to be able to get into a top school? No problem. I mean, you don't have to have a sport to get into a top school. You have to have other things. Maybe you'll have a patent, that the captain of the lacrosse team didn't have, right? Unfortunately, and this is why it's so maddening in some ways, admissions work is apples and oranges and pears and grapes and kiwi. That's the nature of the decision making. And again, one of my ancient Greek heroes, Aristotle, he lends a lot of insight into that form of decision making. It is an art, But I really want to encourage you, as Jim Nondorf does, to work from a sense of positivity, not what's lacking, but how can we build this out in a way that's coherent and makes sense for me, if I'm the teen, for my child, if you're the parent. There was talk in the interview with Sal Khan this week about authenticity in applications, which I didn't get to today. I don't have wisdom on that. I don't have quotes on that. I'm saving that for the essay webinars. But when you worry about what's lacking and then you choose things that you think are objectively necessary for your child, that's when your child's profile could start to lose authenticity. But when you're thinking about, oh, who is my kid? And what is my kid telling me? And what does my kid want to explore? Okay, yeah, let's go in those directions. Let's check that out. Then you're on the way to having that authenticity in the application. And that's a conversation among admissions officials, authenticity. Yeah, people cry in admissions committees. They become attached to their candidates. So again, I just felt that was such a touching comment, and it's something I wanted to convey to you guys, that what admissions officers are dealing with is it's an economics of scarcity. There are 1,200 seats and 50,000 applicants or 80,000 applicants. And yes, they are the gatekeepers. But they are trying to do it in a way that is as fair as possible. And sometimes maybe they don't even think it's fair. Sometimes they break down because they wish there were more, and they really do become attached to their candidates. They will argue on behalf of their candidates in these decision-making meetings. So just wanted to give you a sense of the other side, some humanity on the other side. This is, I think, the creme de la creme of admissions wisdom. What you do with the resources you had or have is what will make your application. And that's why I like to talk about responding to the moment. And I know our teens feel all this disappointment about these exciting summer plans, among other things, to do with social life, all sorts of things. We're so disappointed. And we want to give time, and we want to give space to those feelings and to that grieving process. But when we're thinking about top schools, the admissions officers are going to be looking at how you turn around. Now, if you turn around too quick and you have a meltdown, right? So it's all about that timing too. So we want to give space to the sadness, and we want to give energy to that going forward and really making little miracles out of the resources that we have. That's the challenge. So, and that's the wisdom. And let's move on to today's featured topic, new trends in college admissions, something I've been following in many ways since I've been in business, but most especially since these new discussions have arisen in the admissions community. So here we go. This is like a super duper brief history of college applications. So FYI on that. This content could be fun for you. So here we go. Well, at first in the 19th century, there was actually no application. There were no universal standards, and going to the university was a very clubby and white male Christian affair. Over the course of the century, private schools then opened enrollment to public school students. So that was the big sort of diversity move over the course of the 19th century. On the other hand, there was a new tool of exclusion, okay, that was derived. And I'm going to talk about that in a second. What happened in the early 20th century was that there's this interplay between two dynamics. There's the democratic openness that's going on in the 20th century, but there's also cultural exclusivity. So campuses become more diverse. What does more diverse mean? It means more public school students and more Jewish students. In response to that, in 1919, Columbia releases its first modern college application, a character-based application. And so the character-based application was made to weed out Jewish applicants. And it included a photo. And it was just recently, like, I don't know, in the past 5 years, that I think Harvard dispensed with the requirement to send a photo. It used to ask you to send a photo. And it didn't, the reasons, you know, in the later 20th century were not the same as the early 20th century. But in the early 20th century, sending in a photo had to do with showing how Christian you looked. However, in 1926, the SAT is launched, and it's launched to filter out academically underqualified candidates, because I said, really, you know, admission to these great schools is a very clubby affair. And what happens is this increases Jewish student admits. So at the same time, what's also happening is that Harvard, Yale, and Princeton add an essay. So they follow Columbia's initiative and they add the essay. And the essay is used to weed out candidates based on character. And it's used to counter religious and class diversity. So what's very interesting, if you look at the history of admissions, is that in the early 20th century, the personal statement is actually used to exclude candidates. It's a classist affair, exercised. The SAT, however, is used to include. By the time we get to the late 20th century, the causes and conditions, the whole context around the SAT, for example, the fact that it's really become an exercise in privilege, in that, you know, those who can get all the expensive training tend to do better in the SAT. This is a very big issue in admissions discussion. This is why we have this rise in test optional schools. So now we have the SAT is viewed as exclusive and exclusionary, whereas the personal essay is the space where you can show your uniqueness, your diversity. So I just think that's a very interesting phenomenon, the way in which the same tools can really morph over time. I can't really speak to what happened before the 1980s, and I don't know if we really need that information right now. But what I can tell you is that between the 1980s and around 2010, 11, 12, trickling in to the 2010s, there was a steady model of ideal achievement for top schools. If you had good grades, you had good scores, you were well-rounded, if you were talented in sports and art or art, if you wrote a nice essay, you were fine for the top 20 schools. It wasn't as competitive at that point. Of course, you know, there's a whole other piece here which has to do with the introduction of the Common Application, which has allowed students to apply to more schools at once, and then the increase in international applications, which made schools, much more selective. So that's another piece of the morphing that I haven't accounted for here. I'm just sort of focused on the Great Recession right now, but as I'm talking to you right now, I'm spontaneously realizing there's a whole other piece here, but we only have so much time. So I wanted to keep this brief. Anyway, the big point in this first bullet point is that, this steady model, this model that you are all well acquainted with, it really started to die down by 2014, 2015. One shift that was going on between the 1980s and 2010 was that the STEM student starts to rise in prominence and, becomes in many ways the more competitive student over time. So that's one thing I wanted to note. However, with the Great Recession came new discussions among those in the admissions community about rising inequality of access, lack of diversity. The Occupy movement played a big role in academics' imagination, in their work, in their scholarship, and the kinds of discussions that were going on at the university. And of course, this trickled into the admissions office. And they also became very concerned with the effects of the admissions process on teen character and psychology. And this was a real page turner right here, 2014. So Making Caring Common is an initiative run by the Harvard School of Education. What they did is they ran a survey in 2014. They surveyed 10,000 middle and high school students, and they asked them about their priorities. So this was in the news really in 2016 when the Making Caring, when a certain report came out. I'm going to talk about that in a second, the Turning the Tide. So what they found out was that 48% of these teens prioritize their own achievement, 30% prioritize happiness, and 22% identified caring for others as their top priority. So people found this alarming, and it triggered a report which came out in 2016, and this report is called Turning the Tide. Here's the first line from the executive summary. Too often today's culture sends young people messages that emphasize personal success rather than investment in others or our collective future. They were so alarmed that two major initiatives came out in 2016 as a response to it. So you see in the second bullet point, the Coalition for Access, Affordability, and Success. They came out with a new application. So, and this is how, in one way, in which admissions shifted a little bit, because now some students have an extra application. So some schools went over to the Coalition application exclusively, like University of Washington. Okay, changing an application is not, a deep change in admissions. What was interesting here is that the Coalition application was built in order to be sort of like a storehouse for students to build their profile. It was supposed to have another component to it. There was this thing called a locker, and it was supposed to be a way for under-resourced students to gain access to admissions offices and admissions officials earlier on in high school. That piece, I have not seen that develop, but the Coalition for Access, it was an initiative that was created to respond to access. I don't know if they're going to pick that up again as a way to help under-resourced students. So anyway, but what happened is that new application came out, and then Turning the Tide came out with a list of very robust recommendations that really played a role in a shift in admissions. Things really changed after the Turning the Tide report. And schools basically started changing their supplemental essays, and started looking for different things. So the supplemental essays became less focused on the individual and more focused on what an applicant would contribute to the learning and social environment. And definitions of leadership changed as well. And so as my response to that was to come up with the 7 C's, as some of you are already familiar with. So, you know, let's see where we are. So 10 years ago, 8 years ago even, we were coaching students to write essays that highlighted them, that took the other people out of the essay and focused on them as the leader, as the participant. And by 2016, we have totally shifted our advice to students. And so we would get these essays with students who had been taught, or maybe they had done like a personal essay narrative in their high school class as an exercise, and they would show up really proud of their essay. And I would come in, you know, as always, the stern and firm editor, and say, oh no, this is all about you. This can't be all about you. This has to be about what you learned from the world, you know. And the student would feel sometimes, you know, a little stunned by this almost clapback, you know. I was responding to what the admissions community was saying. They were responding to what their high school teachers were saying, and we'd have to have, you know, this convergence and go through another rewrite. And the students were very successful in admissions. So I could see that, you know, the messages that were coming down, and then our responses in helping students really angle themselves as contributing more to the community. And then our reverse engineering, working with students who are younger and saying, oh, what do you care about in the world? How are you going to contribute? How are you going to connect, you know, your aspiration to be a computer scientist with your concern about global warming, for example? So things really shifted as the decade progressed. So evaluation of students changed. So it's no longer the individual leader at the helm. Now it's the collaborative team member who is appreciated. Okay. Students who write about their self-centered career ambitions, that's not appreciated as much as professional aspirations that will make the world better. Students who show their artistic talents, unfortunately, it's not appreciated as much as civic engagement or social entrepreneurship. So sending in an art portfolio with drawings, you've taken an art class, that's just not going to help you in admissions anymore. It's just not. Unless you have like a real creative voice, and that voice is sort of connected to some of the other things that you have in your application. Otherwise, you know, the fact that you like to draw and it helps you relax, and perhaps you're talented even, that's not going to make a difference. But if you like to draw and you're into art and you created an art class for young kids so that they can get in touch with their creative talents, and maybe one of those art kids won an art award, which one of our students has a story like this from years back. That's a whole new story. It's a whole new admissions profile. Another shift, objective merit, for example, like the piano CM level 10, it's not as interesting as individual initiatives and creative projects. So right now we have some of our students who are teaching under-resourced kids piano online. I believe that was in one of our summer activities from last week, stuff like that. Privileged forms of merit like the SAT and summer programs, not as interesting as responding to the times. So if you're aiming for top schools, these are the kinds of things that excite top schools. And we've seen it in our work. You know, again, like I said, I don't mean to brag. I mean to tell you that there's like going about things in a systematic way, which involves being open to new developments, responding to that, reverse engineering, it really does lead to very consistent results. This is a quote from 2016 from the Turning the Tide, and I just thought I would include it. The idea isn't about how you should pad your resume, but about how you should have significant experiences as part of your education. So whoever does that, if you're a 4.0 student, if you're a weighted 5.6 student, if you're a 2.5 student, 3.0, we work with all of these students, but if those students have significant experiences, they're going to get into good colleges. And we see it like every year. It's a joy. It's a total joy to see that. So I just sort of extrapolated, like, this is bare bones. You could read it if you want. You could read the executive summary. But this is what they're looking for. This is really what the admissions community is looking for these days. They want to promote meaningful contribution to others, to convey to students that contributions like caring for a sibling or getting a job to supplement family income are valued. I know there was a parent wrote me this week and talked about her daughter cooking the family meals. Yes. Maybe there's an essay about that. Maybe it goes into additional information. Yes, it's valuable. It speaks to character. And I think I talked about character last week. Let's assess the ethical responsibility of the student, right? And so do more through a sense of, like, day-to-day behavior. They're looking at, what is a student like on a daily level? So they will look to the letters of recommendation, and that speaks again to authenticity. So, like, if a student presents themselves in a way that doesn't make sense in terms of the letters of recommendation, there might be a question there. So these days, the admissions community prioritizes quality, not quantity, of extracurriculars. They discourage overcoaching, and they would really love to alleviate the pressure around standardized testing. And there might be some questions about, paradigm shifts and new trends in admissions. Where's this standardized testing going? I don't know. I feel like it could go either way. That's its own topic, and maybe I can get like an SAT specialist to join me for a webinar to talk about that. I don't know. However, these are a few things that I do feel confident in predicting. There's going to be a continued shift away from the individualistic achiever to the collaborator. So much in the news about the pandemic and the way it's unveiling all of these inequalities in our society. And most of us on this call, we're in a good spot here. We're in tech, we're in Silicon Valley. And, we want to be able to teach our teens, to be really mindful of things beyond our niche here, our safe bubble. And admissions committees are going to want to see that. So again, I think I talked to you about the student who had acquired free medical equipment for free clinics here in the peninsula, and talking about the way she became acquainted with, just a mile or two down the road, there's a whole different kind of community here. How do I start to process that? How do I start to contribute to community bonds? That kind of thing is, that kind of mindset is going to be appreciated. There will be a continued emphasis on what you did with what you have. That's going to gain more attention. There's going to be increased excitement about students who, turn crisis and disruption into opportunity, connect their interests to the common good, possess that cultural intelligence I talk about so much, have developed soft skills, and have developed themselves in a real world context. So I think that's what I've got for you. One more extra thing. They'll be hungry for students ready to dedicate themselves to problem solving and seeing themselves in a new way, seeing the world in a new way. And in some of my circles, my social justice circles, there's this term expansiveness that's being used as almost an improvement on the word inclusiveness. So we like to talk about inclusiveness and aim for that. But expansiveness also means going beyond all the old ways, really thinking about new things. And many people are talking about the fact that we're in this new situation where we're creating new paths for ourselves as we're embarking on them, because maybe we didn't expand our minds as much. Maybe this is a wake-up call, like to really think out of the box about how we treat other people, how we go about public health, how we educate people into thinking through being healthy for others. So much going on, so much in terms of developing vaccines, testing, data science. How can we expand beyond what we already know? And the students who are really reaching, even if you failed attempts are rewarded in admissions. And I believe I've talked to you about the student who wrote her common application essay about leading her band camp team to utter failure one summer and being admitted to Stanford. So that's what I've got at this point. Oh yes, I want to talk about resources and then I'm done. I've probably gone over, I don't really know what time it is. Oh yeah, I talked a little too long. I'll be done in a second. I've linked you to the SalCon interview, the Vox article, test optional schools, what UC San Diego is doing on testing. I linked you to the NACAC tool for the changes in the admissions process. I will say it's a little clunky. Hopefully they will update it soon. There's a PBS docuseries on Asian Americans that's coming out next week that I wanted to alert people to, just in case you want some family time, viewing time. That's on my radar. I've been just blessed and privileged to work with so many Asian Americans throughout my time running Blue Stars and before, and I'm gonna watch it for sure. And then also, after you do that, perhaps DJ D-Nice on Instagram will be running Club Quarantine. So he's a fantastic DJ who's been basically just opening up his apartment. He does these Instagram live dance shows. It's the weekend, so party time. I'm sure he'll be doing stuff this weekend. He gets really cool guests, like Michelle Obama might show up, Kamala Harris might show up. Sharon Stone showed up yesterday. I will say I was listening to DJ D-Nice while creating some of the slides yesterday and got me really inspired. Dance, people, dance. Don't forget to dance. And oh yeah, also yesterday he collaborated with Teach for America. He did this whole shout out and happy hour for teachers around 5 p.m. yesterday. He's based in LA. So he's an awesome dude. And I'm gonna end on that. So I am going to stop sharing and see what kinds of questions you have. So give me a minute. And see what kinds of questions you have. That was a lot. Another way of putting this too is, it was like, the way we talk about it too among the team, it's like up until like really 2016 when this all came out publicly and it wasn't just a part of isolated discussions. It was sort of like check the box. That was sort of the strategy. Oh, an instrument, a sport, community service, good grades, excellent test scores. It was a check the box. And that worked. That worked. Until it didn't. Until there was increased scarcity. Increased scarcity more applications, plus a change in the social mood as a result of the Great Recession and now the pandemic. Somebody's asking me sports. Okay. How important are sports to a college admissions office? Does the recent scandals, okay. I'm wondering, okay, so when you mean the recent scandals, the college admissions scandals where the kids who were not rowing athletes being put on the rowing team, at that level of college athletics, I'm not sure. I do work with students who work on being recruited to athletics, and because they truly are athletes, I don't worry about that aspect of the situation. But how to talk about sports. Okay, so I'm gonna just first be blunt and then be more nuanced, which I often do. Sports, if you are not aiming to be recruited, sports can really go either way. It can work against your application. It can work for your application. If you are not being recruited, how can sports work for your application? Well, if you're team captain, right? If you rise to the level of a leadership position, that could help you. If you're coaching also in meaningful ways, that could translate into a professional aspiration. If you're coaching in ways that show civic engagement and contribution to community, like coaching under-resourced kids in tennis, for example, or golf, or whatever, something like that. Those are ways that it can help candidacy. It can really hurt candidacy, I find, a lot. And that is, students get so caught up in the sports that they don't have time for deeper commitments. So let me backtrack for 1 second. So I was saying the check the box mentality, that was a more superficial sweep of all of these required sort of eligibilities. But really, since 2014-15, what colleges are looking for is deeper commitment. So when you initiate something, when an adult initiates something, it's hard enough. When a teen initiates something for the first time, there's all sorts of habituation and missteps and mistakes and drama, and there's so much that goes on with doing something new. And so we often find that our students who are very involved in sports, not necessarily going to be recruited, but they love it, they're good at it, they love their team culture, they love their coach is a role model, it's a big piece of their teen life, you know. And then they're still trying to do it all. They're still trying to do it all. Well, there are meltdowns. We do meltdowns. That's a part of our service, is to include coaching through meltdowns. It's a really important piece. Meltdowns are instructive. But it really hinders. It can hinder. Often we get like students in 12th grade who come to us in 12th grade. Water polo, all 4 years, and DECA, so the business club, DECA, and did nice things and maybe got an award or 2 in DECA, wants to go to Princeton. And I have to say, we'll try. Of course, we'll try. Always try. I always try. However, I don't see it. I don't see it. And then, you know, there's lots of tears and people get mad at me or the counselor. So the sports, it's sticky and it's tricky. It's individualized. And we work with quite a few students. So I say, I'm going to tell you right off the bat, I see this as a time suck. And they say, I'm doing my sport. I'm like, I'm going to support you then because it's your decision. And then 6 months later, if there's a meltdown, that's a new situation. And you're there for the meltdown and help that student make their own decision. It's always so much about agency. It really is. I hope that's helpful. You can always come back to me. I'm going to look at more questions here because I'll stay on for like 10 more minutes and then we could always do another session. You're considering a summer university immersion program. Does this help with application? Does the summer immersion program at Stanford make my child look like it's a privileged thing? You know, should my child do this or not? Depends on the program, depends on the profile. You know, that advice from Jim Nondorf, you know, that students will be evaluated on what did you do with what you had. Well, if you're a teen and your mom and dad had the resource and you gained real insight into it and it really helped you think through how you can be a more empowered adult, yeah, do the immersion program, do it. But do other things too. Make meals for the elderly in your neighborhood, you know, make sure that your child is exerting themselves on behalf of community right now. That will be looked at for sure. So do both. Okay, I have to read more. When you said the admissions committee were crying to fight for certain, were they primarily based on what they read or applicants contacted them personally? Yes. So, okay, so what this parent is asking, is there a way for my child to have contact with the regional admissions officer? So yes, so it used to be when they would come to visit your school, you could first talk, or a college fair. You go to college fair, or you go to the info session at your school, and you can make contact with the regional officer there. If not, basically, I would first either go to the university of choice and just go to virtual tour and see what they have and sign up for a session there to make contact with the school. They might have a list of the regional admissions officer there. Reach out, totally reach out, find a way to reach out and absolutely do it. Say, hey, I'm interested. Are there ways to get to know more about the school? Do you have your own virtual office hours? They want to get to know students. And so yes, they become attached to them, but not just because they've called them. They might become attached to a student who has not called or contacted them. But this application stands out. And I think I said in the past, you know, we've gotten, our students have gotten notes from admissions officers after they've been admitted, like, wow, I really loved reading that. Oh, wow, I was so inspired. And they didn't contact those people. So it's a lot of strategy in the application, but absolutely, you know, be in touch. There are ways to be in touch. Don't be a nag, right? It's all PR. But yes, do it. Okay, I feel like I've cleared the deck for now, but feel free to contact me during the week. Taking a little break, but you know I'm around. And yeah, I hope this sort of framing meta discussion was helpful for you guys. I hope it feels energizing. I'm really excited to start talking about essays. So much fun. And wish me luck on my Zoom tutorials. Have a great day. Have a great weekend. And I will talk to you soon. Take care.